On today's episode, the Chicago Blackhawks opened up their training camp yesterday, and I will be going over everything that we learned from day one down at Fifth Third Arena. I'll also go over the injury announcements that the Blackhawks made yesterday as well. And then to wrap things up, I will unveil who comes in at number 3 on my top 10 prospects list. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Today is Friday, September 23rd. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at Jack Bushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And I need to remind you all that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline, which is both the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and Vegas casino games here in 2022. BetOnline, where the game starts. And if you're listening to the audio version of today's episode and you like what you're hearing, then please be sure to go and show some support first by following the podcast. Be sure to go and rate the show with 5 stars if you like what you're hearing today as well. And if you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, then you can also go and leave me a review. And the best part about it all is that it's 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. So go and follow the show right now, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And if you're not already watching the video version of today's episode, then go and give your head a shake. You got to be sure to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, folks, because every episode moving forward throughout the rest of training camp, the preseason, the start of the regular season, every episode is also going to have a video uploaded to YouTube. So if you haven't done so already, please go and help the boy out. Go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. I would really appreciate all the help, folks. Also, be sure to go and smash the like button down below on this video and comment as to which defenseman do you now think has a leg up with Ian Mitchell being out for the next 6 weeks. And last, go and ring that bell, turn on the push notifications, and that way you can get notified when the episode gets uploaded to YouTube each and every day. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And thank you all for making the show your first listen here to start off your day. As I already mentioned in the cold open, day one of Chicago Blackhawks training camp kicked off yesterday down at Fifth Third Arena. Some serious first day back to school vibes at Fifth Third Arena. Saw a lot of the beat writers, the media folks. Cool to catch up with the ones that I didn't see over the summer at development camp or at the prospect showcase. Just a lot of fun to be back in that atmosphere and, see some of the NHL guys. We've been seeing prospects for the last few months, and it's nice to see, some of the big names that the Chicago Blackhawks have in their organization hit the ice once again. So, yeah, good to get back into the grind, back into the swing of things. It was just very, very fun to be at Fifth Third Arena and see the Blackhawks ready to kick off this grind leading into the regular season. But we learned a lot of good stuff from day one at Blackhawks training camp. What I wanted to begin with is probably what most of the listeners out there want to hear about, even though, again, we didn't really get anything newsworthy or groundbreaking. But Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane both spoke with the media yesterday for the first time in quite a while. And when I was at Fifth Third Arena and I saw Kaner kind of walking his way up to the media room, I was just kind of shaking my head thinking, oh, this poor guy, because obviously everyone was going to ask both Kane and Toews about their futures, about what happened this summer, trade discussions, contract negotiations, all that good stuff. It was the first of many times that they're going to be asked about that throughout the course of the season. So I definitely feel bad for those two guys because, they're dreading going up in that media room and being asked the same things over and over and over again. But Patrick Kane actually took it pretty well, I thought. The first thing he said when he was up in the media room was, what's up, guys? Anything new? So he obviously knew, the situation. A lot has gone down for the Blackhawks, especially over the summer when they traded Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Dach. And the words that Patrick Kane used to describe those trades were shocking, frustrating. He was upset. Crushing was the word that he used. He talked about how he was really close with Alex DeBrincat, and not only on the ice did they have chemistry, but he was one of his best friends too. So definitely a tough pill for Kaner to swallow. Taser was also using the same kind of words to describe the moves that the Blackhawks made over the summer. Said he was angered a little bit, which I get. I mean, every talented player that these two guys have had alongside them the past few years have been dealt out of the organization by the front office. So I get where they're coming from. It's definitely not easy for these two icons to have to, go through this rebuild and be part of this organization when, they want to win each and every game, but the front office kind of has to look at the bigger picture. It's a tough situation for both of them to be in. But as for, kind of their answers on when they were asked about their futures or what happened this summer, both of them really just said they're kind of here to just be focused what's going on the ice. They're excited to be back, enjoying being part of the Chicago Blackhawks. And yeah, nothing really happened this summer in terms of trade discussions. They kind of laughed at all the rumors that have been going down. Obviously, there are a lot of teams out there who would love to acquire both of these two, but it doesn't seem like Kyle Davidson really even had a conversation with either of these guys about waiving those no movement clauses or even talked with other teams about a potential trade. So yeah, nothing really too earth-breaking from this press conference between Kane and Toews and the media, but they did recognize the situation they're in, but they said all the right things. And what can you expect them to say? I mean, oh yeah, I want out of here. I don't want to be part of the Blackhawks anymore. Those are things that they would never say. We're not in agreement with the rebuild perhaps, but one thing that was nice to hear is that for Jonathan Toews, especially because he's the one that's at least publicly had the most trouble kind of accepting the Blackhawks moves and accepting the direction of this franchise. He did say he had a conversation with both Davidson and Al McIver over the summer to kind of help him understand the direction of this team and what the front office is trying to do. So it sounds like Toews finally gets it a little bit. I don't know why it took him this long to understand that the Blackhawks really had no choice but to go this route. But at least, he's had those conversations with Davidson. Both he and Kane have talked a ton with Luke Richardson. So they're in communication like they deserve to be. And like we've heard for the past couple of months now, they're just focused on doing their job on the ice. They're not even really thinking about that stuff right now. And when that time comes later on in the year, that's kind of when those conversations will be had. So once again, nothing too newsworthy from either Kane or Toews' conversations with the media yesterday. But in terms of what happened on the ice, I will say it was interesting to see the line combinations that new head coach Luke Richardson kind of went with out of the gate to open up training camp. We already knew that Patrick Kane and Max Domi were going to start out camp on a line, and in most of the drills yesterday, now remember, it is only day one of training camp, so it doesn't mean everything. But Patrick Kane and Max Domi were skating with Taylor Radish as the left wing on the top line. And I really think that's a spot where Taylor Radish deserves to be. I mean, he had some really good flashes at the end of last season, particularly in the goal scoring department. I think he's always going to be more of a goal scorer than an overall playmaker, but I like his abilities without the puck too. He uses his size. He's tenacious on the back check, forces a lot of turnovers, and just makes things happen. So I'm excited to see him get that opportunity. Hopefully he'll be able to make the most of it here in training camp and could potentially open up the season on that top line with Patrick Kane and Max Domi. I like Domi. I like adding Domi to that line with Kaner because he's got some good speed. He can also play a gritty game, someone who can go in there on the forecheck and cause some havoc. I think that's one thing that Patrick Kane has kind of missed over the years, is someone with both a skill and kind of a grindy game, because when he and DeBrincat would be forced to dump the puck in, a lot of those times with those two being smaller frames, they're not going to go in there and win puck battles along the boards. DeBrincat certainly did get better at that as the years went on, but I think having someone with the grit like Max Domi like bringing in the grit that he has along with the skill, I think that's a good place for him to be. My one concern, though, is whether or not he's going to be able to hold up at center for the entire season, or at least the entire first half, before he's likely to get dealt at the trade deadline. He's never really been a solid face-off man, but, if he's able to pick up his offensive game and be productive alongside Patrick Kane, at the end of the day, I don't think the faceoffs are going to be the end of the world, but that is my one concern about Max Domi potentially being on the top line with Patrick Kane and Taylor Radish, as we saw yesterday. And then as for the second line, I talked in the past couple episodes, I was curious to see how Luke Richardson was going to go about Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. Was he going to pair them together? Well, once he announced that Max Domi was going to be skating with Kane, or that basically told us that Richardson's at least going to start with those two on separate lines. And yesterday, Taser skated with, oh man, now I'm blanking. He skated with Colin Blackwell. I got to check right now or else I'm going to lose my mind. I don't know why I'm forgetting this. It wasn't Andreas Athanasiou, which was kind of interesting. I thought Athanasiou would be given a really big opportunity to open up the year. Why am I dropping the ball on this right now? Tyler Johnson. Thank you, Jack. Jonathan Toews opened up day one skating with Tyler Johnson and Colin Blackwell. I expect Johnson to be a top six guy. That's, it makes the most sense for him to be given that slot. I was kind of surprised to see Colin Blackwell, though, given a top six opportunity right out of the gate. Again, it's day one of training camp, so things obviously could change, but I just figured Andreas Athanasiou would be the one that would fit in there better, considering his speed, his offensive ability. Jonathan Toews is known as a two-way guy. Tyler Johnson's a responsible two-way forward. That just seems like a good spot where Athanasiou could utilize his offensive skill set the most. So we'll see. I don't think Colin Blackwell is a top six player. He's put up some decent numbers over the past couple years, but nothing to suggest that he's an offensive guru or anything of that sort. So we'll see if Blackwell sticks in that spot through training camp, or whether or not Athanasiou can make his way up. But interesting to see that on day one of training camp, the Blackhawks rolled with the top six group of Taylor Radish, Max Domi, and Patrick Kane, and then Tyler Johnson, Jonathan Toews, and Colin Blackwell. All right, that takes care of everything that went down from day one at Blackhawks training camp. Coming up in just a moment, I will get into some of the injury updates that were provided from the Blackhawks yesterday as well. But first, I need to talk to you all about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. You can find all of the latest football developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts on whatever game you want to place a wager on. BetOnline is also your continued source for all sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and game scores. It's both the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and even golf. So head on over to the website today, or you can also use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Segment 2, let's talk about some of the injury announcements that the Blackhawks made prior to training camp opening up yesterday. First, both Colton Dach and Paul Ludwinski, 2 second-round picks in the past couple of drafts by the Blackhawks. Both of them have been placed in concussion protocol and are announced as day-to-day at the moment. We knew Colton Dach was already in concussion protocol after Game 1 of the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase against the Minnesota Wild. Scored a goal inside the first minute from a terrible angle. It was not a good goal for Wild netminder prospect Jesper Wallstedt to allow, but Dach went absolute top corner from over near the corner, the end line, basically. A really bad angle, but that shot of his has really been impressive the last couple of years, and it's been fun to see him continue to grow in that area, and you can tell he knows that's his best weapon. He knows he can score, or he believes he can score at least every time the puck is on his stick in the offensive zone. So it was a roaring start out of the gate from Colton Dach, scoring a goal just a minute into that opening game of the Prospect Showcase. But then, unfortunately, I didn't even see what happened. if he took a hit, if he fell. Not really sure what exactly went down, but to open up the second period, Doc was not on the Blackhawks bench. And then after the game, it was announced that he had been placed in concussion protocol. Now, he was still placed on the Blackhawks training camp roster, so hopefully that's an indicator that the Blackhawks are believing it will be a quicker return than it will be a longer one. Fingers crossed on that, because I really want to see what Colton Dach can do against some of these NHL guys, as he could be moving towards the final year of his junior career. It's a really big year for Colton Dach. He was one of the prospects that actually stuck around for a pretty good chunk of training camp before being returned to the Saskatoon Blades, who he was still a member of before being dealt to Kelowna. So hopefully we'll be able to see Colton Dach here sometime soon at training camp. And then Paul Ludwinski, who is a second-round pick in this year's NHL draft, he also has been placed in concussion protocol. In that second game of the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, he took a brutal hit in the neutral zone, and just his body kind of contorted an odd way. It definitely didn't look good. So the Ludwinski has found himself in concussion protocol too. That one, I honestly don't know. It could be more severe than Dach's. I don't know. I didn't see what happened to Dach's, but I feel like the type of hit that Ludwinski took, it definitely didn't look good. But again, he was put on the training camp roster, so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that that's a sign that the Blackhawks are thinking that he'll be able to come back sooner rather than later. But there's obviously going to be no rush on these guys. They're not going to, force them onto the ice for a couple of days of training camp if they aren't 100% ready. The Blackhawks can afford to be extremely patient with everything this year, honestly. But it would be nice to see both of these guys in action, because I thought they both looked really good at development camp and at the prospect showcase. Ludwinski was one of the biggest standouts with his intensity and energy and the motor that he has. It's actually funny because if I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure when the Blackhawks drafted Ludwinski, he said he has the biggest motor of anyone in the draft, and he's going to put that on full display. And it was really evident during this prospect showcase, especially on the fourth line with Sammy Savoy. Those two were just absolute menaces out there, finishing checks, causing havoc in the offensive zone, and they worked together well too. They made some swift passes, had some good cycles. I don't think either of those guys are going to be offensive dynamos or consistent point producers, but what they can provide away from the puck is something that has me super stoked about each of their futures. So hopefully it's a speedy recovery for Paul Ludwinski and for Colton Dach, and we can see at least a little bit of them before Blackhawks training camp wraps up in a few weeks. The last injury announcement that the Blackhawks made yesterday is the one that hurt the most, and that was defenseman Ian Mitchell will be out for 6 weeks with a left wrist injury. And when I saw this, I just felt absolutely gutted for Ian Mitchell, man, because this was supposed to be a really big training camp for him after playing a top pairing role for the Rockford Ice Hogs last year, really being their number one guy. The Blackhawks elected to go to give him that path, which I think was the correct route to do. He clearly just wasn't NHL ready when he first stepped onto the scene. And I liked the patient approach that they had with him in particular last year. And then coming into this season with Jake McCabe out, by the way, quick update, Jake McCabe ruled out for 10 to 12 weeks, but he's been taking part in some drills so far in training camp. I'm not saying he could potentially come back early. I don't want to put that out there, but McCabe is sure looking good for someone who's supposed to be out for, 2 to 3 months. So keep an eye on Jake McCabe. He could possibly return earlier than we originally imagined. But with McCabe being out, that gave the Blackhawks another open spot on their defense coming into training camp. And a lot of us fans and media folk expected Mitchell to be right in there with Alex Vlasic, Alec Regula, Jakub Galvis, those guys that were going to be pushing hard for those final NHL roster spots. And this is also kind of, I feel like, a make or break season for Ian Mitchell. Being 23 years old, it's kind of now or never to show the Blackhawks that he has the capabilities to be an NHL defenseman. And now that he's going to miss this training camp, man, that's just such a tough break for Ian Mitchell. Not exactly sure what happened with him either. Apparently he was in Chicago a week ago skating, so something must have happened here recently. But yeah, just such a tough break for Ian Mitchell. I was really hoping that he was going to be able to open up the year with the Blackhawks, but that looks like it's not going to happen now, and I'd imagine they're going to at least start his rehab down in Rockford. Hopefully he'll get off to a good start there, and the Blackhawks will be able to call him up early on, but this is definitely a crushing blow for Ian Mitchell, as he will be out for 6 weeks due to a left wrist injury. All right, there are the injury updates that the Blackhawks provided yesterday prior to training camp opening up. Coming up in just a minute, I still have to unveil who comes in at number 3 on my top 10 prospects list. Welcome back to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Moving on into segment 3 before I wrap things up and let you all go enjoy the rest of your weekends. It's time to unveil which player comes in at number 3 on my Blackhawks Summer 2022 Top 10 Prospects list. First, just as a reminder, if you're not all caught up and you haven't seen who's checked in at numbers 10 through 4, then you got to be sure to go and watch those videos first. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to go out of order with this and go see who comes in at number 8 and then who comes in at number 5 and who comes in at number 3. No, you want to be all caught up on the entire list. And I made it very easy for you all to do just that. All you got to do is go and click on Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Go and find my channel. Go and hit the playlist button at the top. And there will be a top 10 playlist, a top 10 prospects playlist right there for you all to click on. And also, to make it even easier, in each of the video descriptions, I have everything time coded. So you don't need to waste a few minutes scrolling through everything and finding out where the right starting spot would be. No, in each video, just go and click at the description and you'll find exactly where you need to jump to in order to get all caught up on my Blackhawks top 10 prospects list. And while you're there, make sure to smash that subscribe button for me. I would greatly appreciate all the support that I could get, folks. So make sure to go and get all caught up on my top 10 prospects list before finding out who comes in at number 3. But getting into that right now, pause there for a moment so y'all can go back and click on the channel. But coming in at number 3 is none other than the 13th overall selection in the 2022 NHL draft, my boy, Frank the Tank, Frank Nazar, who's going to be a freshman at the University of Michigan this year. Incredible program with a really strong roster once again this season. And for these final 3 prospects, I could kind of mix and match them all, although I will say Lukas Reichel is by far solidified himself as the top dog in the Blackhawks organization right now. But as for, well, now that you all know that Frank Nazar is coming in at number 3, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise to hear who comes in at number 2. It will be Kevin Korchinski. I really could have flip-flopped each of these guys. I could have had Nazar coming in at 2. I could have had Korchinski coming in at 3. But I think one thing that kind of swayed me towards Korchinski coming in at number 2 was honestly that I just got to see a little bit more of him so far. Like Nazar wasn't able to go to the prospect showcase because he's already at camp for Michigan. And we got to see a lot of good stuff out of Kevin Korchinski there. And the skating, the offensive upside, I really think Kevin Korchinski has the chance to be a dynamo offensive defenseman one day down the road. And that's not saying that Frank Nazar can't be an offensive dynamo in the future either. It's just, I think I've seen more flashes from Korchinski because he's been around this summer a little bit more than Nazar has, but they're both pretty close. Honestly, I would go 2A and 2B. They're both right there. It's pretty evident that these 3 are the top 3 in the organization right now. Excuse me. But as for Frank the Tank, I loved what I saw out of him at development camp. I knew that he had a good offensive game. That was really something that everyone highlighted coming into this year's NHL draft. I put up really good points with the United States Development Program, racked up 71 points in 55 games there. Good goal scoring ability. I believe he had 1 more assist than he had goals. So he can kind of do it all. Just a really good, well-rounded offensive game. Has a strong shot, good instincts, knows when to pass the puck. But I think the thing that impressed me the most about Frank the Tank at development camp was his intensity. I mean, this dude, he acts like a muscle hamster out there. He gets into the dirty areas. He's grinding in the corners. He'll go to the front of the net. There are some people who are concerned about his size being 5'10", a $170, a $175, but he doesn't play like his size. He's not afraid to do anything out there on the ice, plays with his heart on his sleeve, which I love. The Blackhawks need more of those guys in the system. So I am very happy with the additions of Ludwinski and Savoy, like I mentioned earlier. They need guys who want to be players even when the puck's not on their stick. And Frank Nazar is that. I know he can make a difference offensively, but he knows that he can impact the game in other areas too. I mean, really good on the back check, forces turnovers, just mixes and matches a skill and a grindy game. And that's what has me so intrigued about the opportunities for this kid moving forward. Like, he feels like someone who is a top line, second line player who has a really gifted offensive game, but the way that he plays also kind of meshes well with, I think, what is demanded in postseason hockey. Now, listen, I know the Blackhawks have a long ways to go before they're getting back into the playoffs, but you got to think about that type of stuff. And this was, not a knock on Alex DeBrincat or even Artemi Panarin for that matter when he was here with the Blackhawks. It's not a knock on these guys, but I almost felt like their styles of play just didn't work well with what you have to do to have success in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Artemi Panarin, even this year with the Rangers, didn't look all that good in the postseason, if I'm being honest. And I feel like Frank the Tank has a game that one day, if he keeps doing the things that he's doing right now, works hard, provides energy with each and every shift, plays with his heart on his sleeve, shows no fear out there on the ice, even though he's probably going to be the smallest guy majority of the times, those things are what you need out of a guy who can provide you with, great offense, with a great offensive skill set, and hopefully will be able to be a really good point producer at this level. He also needs to have those intangibles, that will to win, the desire to go into the dirty areas and get the job done, have no fear out there whatsoever. That's what I loved from Frank Nazar. Now, again, this was only a prospect development camp and it was only a few days, but those are the things I've also heard from many scouts and many folks who cover the NHL draft yearly and cover prospects. I've heard all these same things about Frank Nazar, is that he's a warrior out there, man. Don't let his size fool you. He's going to bring it each and every shift, and he's not going to back away from a challenge. And I think that's exactly the type of player, the top of high-end prospect the Blackhawks needed to add to their pool. So I'm really stoked on Frank Nazar. Don't let the number 3 ranking fool you. I really think this kid has an incredible upside because of, his stick handling. His speed is incredible too. I mean, this dude absolutely flies out there. He's not Kevin Korchinski, but for being a forward, he's got some absolute wheels. He does all the intangibles well, and he's a good goal scorer as well as a good playmaker. He can kind of do both. So, yeah, I think the ceiling is very high for Frank Nazar. I'm super excited to see how he's going to continue to develop these next few years, and he's got a really good opportunity to have a massive freshman season with the Michigan Wolverines, considering how talented that roster is from top to bottom. So, yeah, if you're going to keep an eye on any of the collegiate prospects that the Blackhawks have this season, Frank Nazar might be the one that you want to watch the most as he embarks upon his freshman year up at Michigan. All right, folks, I think that is going to wrap up Friday, September 23rd's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on Twitter right now, and go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And after the show, you got to be sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast to get all caught up on everything that went down throughout the NHL offseason. It's free and available on all platforms, so be sure to go and check out Locked On NHL right now, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you all for tuning into today's episode. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And for any questions at all regarding anything related to the show or to the Blackhawks, feel free to email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. That's all one word, lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com, or you can also hit me up on any one of my Twitter accounts. So until tomorrow's episode, thank you all for tuning into the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.